the rhythm with earth. So we know the elements of earth are communicatable. They have communication always. There's nothing that needs to be proven because we're not here to solve the mystery. We're here to accept it.
Welcome to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl, a podcast that illuminates the path to collective healing at the intersection of science and mysticism. This is the Point of Relation.
Today's episode was previously recorded for an online event with Thomas. Although it took place at an earlier date, the insights and discussion remain relevant. Tiokasin Ghosthorse is an educator, musician, and international speaker on peace. He is a member of the Cheyenne River Lakota Nation of South Dakota and has a long history with Indigenous activism and advocacy. Tiokasin is the founder, host, and executive producer of First Voices Radio. In 2016, he received a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize and is the recipient of numerous other awards and honors for the arts, music, and community work. Tiokasin is a master musician of the Lakota cedar flute, where stories and cultural knowledge are conveyed through music. This episode begins with a 1-minute introduction by Tiokasin in his native Lakota language. We hope you enjoy the opportunity to briefly engage with a sacred language you may not otherwise encounter.
A good way to begin is Hamiti Takue. Ambeti wastelo tanya wachianke chante wastea na pechus apielo. Le chanta itaha e wogalake le unkipiki he wastelo. Ambeti wita wania wakan oyate ki wanaki tapo. Ambetu kile waste te unshila wa uncha. He kche wichasha he makayalo. Ho wakanta ka namako ambetu le e we oza le e was yo blocking tilo. The gadaku wa waktani wanidi o blocking tilo. Oyate wichanik tilo. Ukuchi yelo onte ya ama plezo yo. Mi wakapata hao yang namajio. We chayaka echeki onta ya ho na makopta ye. Le mitaku ya gabi keep opta ya dokai wachintelo. Shnia wa untelo. Hechachaki tokata oina shiwa. O ya klapiki ekta haunta nipikta niwe. Le unkipiki hewashtelo. Omitakoye oyasi. Basically saying that the grandfathers are looking this way. The old ones are looking this way. And as an individual, without being an individual, I'm asking to be looked at in a good and humble way, that the people will live, and that the grandfathers are always taking care of us, grandmothers as well. I'm also saying greetings and good day and welcome my relatives. I shake your hands with a good heart, and it's good for all of us to be here. And that necessarily is not just humans. We look to the forever ones who were here first. And let's acknowledge that relationship with all of that, all of those, and the life-giving force of the sun, the moon, and the stars. And it's time we wake up. Today will be a good day, and I'm here in a humble way, not representing myself. I'm a common man, an ordinary man of earth. And I'd like to bring that to honor you in this circle of life with me. And I am grateful for this opportunity to acknowledge you, Thomas, and all the peoples that are joining and hearing us, including the ones we don't see. We'll look at this in a very non-anthropocentric way, because if we only talk about humans, we are leaving out the rest of life that is also listing. But thank you.
That's so beautiful. So very warm welcome from my side. It touches me, and it touches me to hear your language, and it creates like a deep resonance, and it's brought me very close to you, to listen to you. So thank you, and thank you for joining us here. And so I think you said already so many things that are that are important. First of all, that we have, especially in the Western worldview, like white worldview, like a human-centric worldview, versus what you just opened up is a much bigger frame. And maybe you want to speak a little bit to that wider frame, what we see, what we don't see, how we open ourselves up to also what we don't see, and to include more of the ecosystemic part of ourselves. And so to let's start there for a moment, and then go deeper from there.
Okay. I want to say that acknowledging our interrelatedness is mitako yoyasi in the Lakota language. So the word that we have for prayer, which is really not the word for prayer, is wochekia, which means acknowledging a relationship to everything. So we are acknowledging relationship, not connectivity, acknowledging relationship you're involved in living with. And so we want to thank the mineral nations and the plant nations and the animal nations, the human nations, the spirit nations, the four winds and the change and growth in the circle of life. And one is not more important than the other. And one nation is evolving from the other, yet we're all dependent upon each other. And as a tree grows two ways, up and below, is that we all are becoming this mystery. So I'd like to say that we aren't part of Earth. We aren't Earth. People say we are Earth or we are part of Earth, but that's too subjective for me to hear that, or objectified. So we become things, part of something. So if I say we are coming into this dimension from the place of light, energy, without going new agey, this is the way, it's been before people came to the Western Hemisphere. So we have to reinterpret this into English. So if we come into this dimension with this energy, we're coming here to be formed by this form of human. And what happens is that we're learning how to walk, talk, eat, see, smell, hear, feel, just the mechanics of just living here and trying to find the gifts of putting that all together. These are what babies do. And so we are becoming Earth. We're becoming Earth. We are not part of Earth. We're becoming in a constant, continuous way. And then as we are in the middle, growing as we are, we're still doing the same thing as babies. We are still becoming Earth. We're eating, drinking, being, and laughing, and doing all those things babies do. And then we're at the end of the spectrum. We're doing the same thing. We are becoming Earth. People call it dying. We're becoming Earth. But you see on both ends of the spectrum is, excuse me, that when babies come in, they learn to walk and talk, and they see friends, special friends, make-believe friends. And everybody goes through that to a certain age. Then they tell them about reality, right? And then you get to the other side of the spectrum. And the old people are seeing friends that they experienced in life. They're seeing their ancestors. So this is an indigenous way of being without inducing medicine to stop that transition into the next dimension. So you're greeting your future because your ancestors have gone into the future. So this is who we are. This is why in a lot of indigenous peoples, we respect the elders because we know that they are in the future. And if we are looking to the future, then we understand that very well, viscerally, with a full spectrum body. Basically, it's our marrow. When we are transitioning on the other end of the spectrum from the childhood, the baby, the infant child, to the adult, to the older adult, and then when we're ready to move on to the next dimension through either Alzheimer's or dementia, the people who are traditionally involved naturally are allowing this to happen, that the elders are seeing and talking and conversing with those who have already gone into the future, their ancestors, our ancestors, so that the transition is more normal. But in a Western society, you're given psychoactive drugs to prevent that because it's not normal for the society, because that's viewed as diseased. So there's a difference in how we view natural as to compared to a civilized human being, how we work with the mechanics of how a person gets old and they are non-productive. But we constantly are in continuum with the elders who have gone into the future. And that's why we treat the elders as much as we can in an honorable way here, because that's basically our library, or our treasure of how we would like to go. They've set the example, just as the earth has set the example, because as you know, they are our oldest ancestors. And we must treat those older ancestors as our elders, which is Earth.
Beautiful, lovely, lovely. And I loved also what you said before, is that we are not just on the planet, like that there's this kind of mechanistic worldview that there's a human being on the planet, but it's a whole system. And this was beautiful. And maybe staying a little bit with the elders, like what are practices through which we can be in relationship and in maybe in communication with the elders, and the ones that went before us? Maybe there are specific practices or ways how to establish that kind of inner connection or relationship.
Well, I'm not a shaman or a fortune teller or a spiritual guru or any of these things, Thomas, but I do realize they're inherently in all of us. Our DNA is of those same elders. So to deeply see within, when you close your eyes, as you know, it's a vaster universe than when you open your eyes. So when I say ancestors, I can actually see ancestors in the trees, in the rocks, and the context of communication is the older language you have with Earth rather than technology. You're able to understand the intuitive values of what the Earth is saying rather than instinctual values of what technology brings to you as survivorship. One is living, one is surviving. So we develop a sort of this just panic-driven language to treat trauma. But in the world of the worldview of Indigenous folks, and I don't speak for all, is my experience is that the peace is within the earth, and that peace has always been changing, always, and we need to be, and we are in the rhythm with earth. So we know the elements of earth are communicatable. They have communication always. There's nothing that needs to be proven, because we're not here to solve the mystery. We're here to accept it. And the difference is between how we view is to solve the mystery in one end, and that's driving people crazy because there never will be an answer. And science and religion and politics and whatnot try to do that, where many Indigenous peoples, or the indigeneity of all of us, indigeneity in all of us, understand that the intuitive value is actually the communication, the means of communication of intelligence. And that's what all the others, non-anthropocentric beings, are. They have this value of being able to speak to us through those ancestors. And so the ancestors that we described, if you say that Native Americans, they do everything in circles, that's kind of true, but yet it's a colonial view, because a circle means revolution. round and around. But if you understand even deeper this value of what a spiral is, because we could see, we clench our fist and we have a spiral. We know the spiral on top of our head, our fingernails, our fingertips, everything seems to be a spiral. And so there is no beginning and no ending in that so-called time concept. There is no beginning and ending. So we are on that. And through a friend of mine who said that we are on that continuum of a spiral, and we're walking into the future backwards. And once we walk into the future backwards, we understand that these ancestors, our ancestors, are gone into the future first, and we trust that. And so we have trust in the future, not anxiety or angst that things are going to turn out bad or good, but because you can see where you've been when you're walking backwards into the future. So the ancestors are always holding you. And the ancestors, in this case, to me, is the earth. Earth holds you, gives you, cares for you every second of your life without question, always giving, never sharing, always giving to all life, not just to human beings, you see. And I think that is what we need to change the thinking, that to take the human out of the center. Because from what I'm hearing, if we put the human in the center, it's all indicating that we are lacking something, and we're looking to extract those ancestors that have power, and that because we're missing that same recognition.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you said something very lovely, many things, but one thing that stayed with me especially was, we are not here to solve the mystery, but to accept it. What a beautiful sentence. Wow, it's lovely. I love that. So much resonates with me. That's lovely. Like how we put ourselves on top of the mystery by trying to solve it versus to bow down to the mystery and let us be taught by it. This is very lovely. So what's this time for you? What are the times that we are in? It seems like there is a lot of stress showing up. There's a lot of change. There are a lot of things that are scary for many people, I think, right now, including climate change and many other crises that are happening. So how do you look at this time? Like, well, how does this, and also maybe what's the prophecy for this time, if there is? Just anything you want to say.
I want to just prepare people to say the prophecies that I've been told are very hard and that we need to prepare, but I'll get to that a little later here. So in a lot of indigenous circles, there is no such concept for time. It's impossible to apply that to the mystery. But to be in the moment, as we say, is hecha, to be here, always here, and to be always awake. Kiktapo, I mentioned it when I said that, is to wake up. And that means to know that every moment that you are in is innocent. There will never be a repeat. And that innocence doesn't have to do with guilt or anything like this. So what I see the angst in people's is because they don't trust the future. And so if we are not present, where are we? We are not here between you and I, or who goes into the future and who goes into the past. So we are never here. We're always thinking about being a better human being, a better planet, a better civilization, something better, but we don't want to recognize why we are here, who we are here. And so through this is that what I do is to be in the present of this great action, this great being called Earth, is that she's always consciously in the present. She is not in the future or the past. She is here. And if you're in natural rhythm with Earth, she teaches you, she shows you how to be present consciously, intuitively. And your thinking comes the same way, that your language no longer becomes denatured, but you speak more of Earth first, because every part of you, excuse me, comes from Earth and is Earth in that way. So if we are speaking a denatured language, that means we eventually begin to speak a biophobic language. So when we speak a biophobic language, we're only speaking about the human frailties of how much we miss and how much I need to heal. And so these words, I, me, my, mine, and ours, are prevalent in the language because we're centered on ourselves as human beings. But again, Black Elk from the Lakota talks about that the center of the universe is everywhere. It's not one place or the other. And I think when you feel that, you know that there is really no language for that. And I often talk about the indigeneity in all of us. And I would say lately, a lot of these prophecies, and I was just looking at some prophecies the other day, especially with the Book of the Hopi, others that I've heard through the times I've grown up and heard, and later ones, these generations, that these times that we cannot date, but in this society we tend to date the generations of Generation X and Y and Z, the Joneses generation, the baby boomers generation, and so we're dividing the peoples already, and we classify them. But in from what I know, in the Lakota way, every generation is the seventh generation. It doesn't begin here or end here. It's a continuum. So if you're in the present seventh generation, you always understand that what you do in the seventh generation affects generations behind and ahead. We're present with intuition, and intuition is the consciousness of Earth. The communicative value that we are missing is intuition, because before any thought processes of humans were here, it's intuition. In other words, if you skip ahead, there is no such thing as artificial intuition. There is artificial intelligence, but artificial intuition can't ever exist because it's always intuition. It was here before we were. It can't be packaged. It can't be put into any spiritual value. It cannot be put into religion, science, or even governments. It can't be. Trees communicate through intuition, not artificial intelligence or intelligence, because that communicate. How much of this are we missing by not being present with them or into the future because we've been away from the natural rhythms of Earth?
So when you speak of intuition, you also speak about the synchronization or an alignment with the natural rhythm of Earth. Is that what you just said? Yeah.
Yes. And there's many things that we do that are, I would, for myself, I would do, there's these ceremonies. These ceremonies don't require smoke and feathers and, all the things that we are stereotyped to do as Native people. It's a simple recognition. Like I said before, it's more like acknowledging relationship that you go outside and you go to nature, but it's not that. It's that you notice nature, you acknowledge nature, but we forget, because we're so human-centered, we forget that nature is already acknowledging us. Nature, those trees know we're there already. Like a horse knows we're there already, scanning us, knowing us. But we don't have that because it's all about us. We're supreme beings. We're the only ones who can think. We're the only ones who can build a bomb. but these other beings are not doing that. So I think that the earth and the world as it is changing over. So we are also living out our prophecies that we need to change inevitably, but we need to let go of this, how would I say, deteriorating dimension. It's deteriorating, and this other world is here in the prophecies of the Hopi, the fifth world. And many Native people are already in the fifth world, and the thinking, the feeling is there. So the language that we are using today, Thomas, has to change and go back to not go back, but understand the etymology of culture, the etymology of this language we're using to make it less scientific, less academic, and more simple, so that even other human beings who can't afford academia can understand what you're talking about.
We all get triggered at times. We all want to improve maybe our capacity of our nervous system to stay related, to include triggers, to learn how to transform triggers into movements, to be more resourced. And so we designed a 7-day path, how through different levels of practices to activate different parts of ourselves, to learn that, to go through a step-by-step process and harvest step-by-step different levels of resources that we can have to train that function of regulation, to look at where am I dysregulated, where can I tap into parts of myself that can hold those dysregulated parts more and transform them and learn from them, not just to try to get rid of it or not have any challenges, but to develop more relational capacity to the events that are happening in our life. And that gives us more freedom. That gives us more freedom to become more fluid within the beautiful moments of our life, but also within the challenging moments of our life. And that increases our inner freedom, and that helps us to choose new possibilities to do certain things differently, or simply to experience more regulation, more also groundedness, to sleep better, to recharge our battery better, to meditate differently. So there are many, many benefits that, of course, come with a deeper sense of regulation. And if you want to be part of our reset and you want to stick with us throughout the 7 days, so please, this is going to be a great journey, and please enjoy the journey, and you will soon get access to what we have designed for you to go through this deeper practice. So I wish you a beautiful day, and I wish you many blessings for your life.
Visit the link in our show notes or go to mysticcafeonline.com to join our global membership community, the Mystic Cafe, and participate in Nourishing Your Nervous System, a 7-day reset. The 7-day path of practices will begin with a live event with Thomas on February 16th. We hope to see you there.
Wow. So when you talk about the fifth world, can you say a few more sentences about the fifth world?
So, what I'm told, the fifth world has no nouns. It's one of energy, one of a language that cannot be interpreted. And in this world that you and I are talking about, the modernity is speaking primarily out of nouns, subjective and objectifying domination of the earth. Who has not been dominating the earth is, we can say, human beings, but indigenous peoples aren't dominating the earth. We're living with the earth, are still attempting to do that. Well, this domination of a supreme being telling us instructing us how to live here. So our questions are not how to do something instructively. It's understanding that we don't know anything until we experience it. Then we can state out of this is our experience, this is our story. So the story goes that if we are using already a verb-based language as Indigenous peoples do, that's the transition, not the transformation, the transmitting, the transition into that world that we talk about. So the stagnation is that the cream of the crop in this society, in the Western way of thinking, is quantum physics. Physics is stagnated with nouns, so it can't go anywhere. But in the other languages that have quantum physics encoded in these indigenous languages are verb based, and they are moving constantly, and we're describing energy and the motion of the energy. And you could do that. Anyone could do that today if we just slow down and understand that the language that we are using now, the language of non-present or present phobia, present phobic language, biophobic language. We're using these languages to not be here. And all it is a simple be here and understand this moment, because maybe we don't like who we are. So the prophecy that I talk about are, you can say they're written, but what if they were not written? As the Western mind tends to think that has to have proof, where the native people in sustainable language and sustainable living, not something new, that we don't even have the word for sustainable because you're living them, not practicing living, not practicing meditation, not practicing yoga. We're not, how could one practice living when you're living, right? So we're not taking time sequences out to practice something that we should be living. So it's a different way of being. And I always think about, is there room for Native people in this language that we're talking in English? Has there been room for Native people's ideas? If we're speaking dimensional languages into a binary language, dualistic language of right and wrong, when in the old Lakota, there were no opposites. There were no such thing as opposites. But we tend to work in it because it works in this society. Right and wrong, good and evil, up and down, supreme, inferior, cause and effect, beginning and ending. So these are all opposites. But in more natural settings, in languages that speak no opposites, that's hard to put into a container so that the West can practice it. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it speaks a lot about to the liquefaction of language or the crystallization of language. What I hear you say is also because I worked a lot, or I do work a lot on trauma and collective trauma, it feels to me like that part of the world's frozen, and then we look at the world as if we were separate from it. And then when we liquefy it, and when we are much more in flow with things, so then what I often call the large language model that we are sourcing our language from already prevents a lot of things that we don't even know that we are preventing them. And so when I listen to you, because in a way, when we look at the inner process of either frozen life or liquefied fluid life, like energy and flow, then naturally, I believe, we start to use again more verbs and less nouns, because it's not a contraction, because or like a tension in my body. It's actually tightening up. It's not,
Yeah.
or it's not numbness, but it's numbing. And so a lot of the externalized nouns actually become again processes. And so when I listen to you, this feels to me very it resonates in me as flow. and as movement. You're constantly participating in the movement. That's beautiful. And so what do you think, or what do you feel or intuit are the qualities that we need at the moment as living in this time or dealing with the current situation of the world? How are we more of service? What's helpful? How do we unify, or or at least become aware of the separation that we created, this dualistic separation from the world, and then objectifying the world and seeing it as a resource we can extract? How, maybe you can speak a little bit to this whole. Mhm.
Yes. Let me begin with that. In our language, there is no concept or word for domination. That our language is relational, not connective, not connecting. But I hear a lot of that. But because we don't want to be in relationship with Earth, because we own Earth and we're on top of Earth, we dominate Earth. So if we take the domination away, what does that indicate? Lack of control. There is no authority. But in the Western world, it takes 12 years, said by John Gatto, who won an award, a Teacher of the Year in New York State, saying on his retirement, he said, paraphrasing him, he said, it takes 12 years to learn how to become reflexive to authority. And so you're looking at the one God, the mayor, the doctor, the lawyer, those who are in authority. But if you remove domination from that, who are they? And so this wow. That would be, if I were a Westerner, that would be hard to understand. There is things that we have to leave behind in order to keep moving, not into future progressively, but something that it's maintaining living. Who's maintaining living but Earth? And to take an answer and say, here you go, Western people, from the indigenous peoples, here's your answer. We can do that because the knowledge is, and the common sense is sourced based, not resourced. So in a good way, this reality, using reality is basically waiting for the package of being saved. So we speak in saviorship language instead of, I would, and see, this is how I speak, because I've really simplified my language, and it's almost too direct sometimes for people, is I was told there is no hope. Because without hope, you have to do what's required. We don't speak a survivor language, we speak a living language. And we're not afraid of not having, because we're grateful for what we do have. I think that by the language of being present, if you're present, you're not afraid of scarcity. You're not afraid of not owning. You're not afraid of not dominating, because there's no such thing. And to have these ideas of domination say that you as indigenous peoples need to save us is kind of absurd, because we are allowing Mother Earth to save us. That we know that we can't save Mother Earth because we don't own Mother Earth. We can't subscribe to Mother Earth saying, here's what you need in order to save us. So it's more like, if you're in balance and you're living with Earth, you'll already be in the medicine and the movement and motion of Earth. So if you're in a motion with it, you're not afraid of not having. In the old Lakota language, there's no word for rich or poor. See, those are the very dichotomy opposites. So if you don't have words for poor or rich, then what is there? because the poor are richer based on ego. You say economics with egonomics. So when we say that, then there must be a good giving, as Earth gives, only gives, and the generous cultures of the world are always giving and without expecting an exchange. So I think that's how Earth lives. She gives and gives and gives. And some people say she takes away, but no, she's always creating. So that's giving without expectation. But I think one thing that we forget, Thomas, is I'm very respectful of this language. I try to use it in the most direct way as I can because of the way the Lakota language is. It doesn't beat around the bush. You see, we need to, because Mother Earth is requiring that now. Mother Earth is not hoping. A tree is not hoping. They're being and requiring what is they're made to be required for, if that makes sense. They're conscious of why they're here.
Hmm. It touches me very much to feel your, like how much awareness you brought to the language and how much you honor language, because I think the language and how we use language is very important, and like the awareness of not only what words we use, but what's connected to when we speak. And so when I listen to you, like it feels very, I can resonate very much with the quality of awareness that you bring into language. That feels really beautiful. So thank you for that. And also thank you for reminding us to reflect on how we use language and what we are actually saying when we are saying certain things, and how important it is to fixate a world or to open a world, like to not be locked in that world that we are speaking from. So that's beautiful. So thank you. And so when and I loved what, like, that you bring the conversation back again and again to the generosity or the giving dimension of Earth, and how you reframe the domination, like that actually the flow comes from a different direction, as we often see it in a very human-centric worldview. And that reconnecting or saving the planet is already something to examine, this language. And just underlining a few things that I heard, I think that are very important to bring awareness to. So that's beautiful. And so I maybe one more thing, I see that the time flies and we're like already at the top of the hour, but so what's the role of building community, or in having like a community of practice, having a community of ceremony? Like what's the dimension of the we-ness, like the relational quality, including community with all levels of beings and nature? Like, do you want to speak a little bit to that also in this time? Because this time, especially in the West, is becomes often isolated, is loneliness, isolation, separation are qualities that we see. And we also see kind of a strong practice, in at least in some parts of society, of relational spaces, more community spaces, more being together and sharing in a space. And maybe you can speak to the whole aspect of community, the resilience of community in times of crisis.
You know, it's funny. I was just speaking about that to some friends this morning about community. And one is more of a neighborhood, one is a community of people together. But when you go to the indigenous nations, it's about community, the trees and what people call nature, when we don't have a word for nature, you know. To understand that domination, if you have domination, there cannot be any community, because domination gets in the way of intuition. They can't coexist. And anthropocentrically, or anthropocentricity, lies at the core of decolonization, right? If you understand this, language is often used to justify bias towards living communities. And over these years, over those practicing decolonization through anthropocentricity is not going to happen because they're just using and regurgitating the same thought processes. And so, Thomas, what are we learning here? What did we learn and how do we learn it? I can say this because of coming from knowing one way and being forced to learn another way, saying you cannot be Native, you cannot be Lakota, you have to be an American, you have to be a Westerner and get your education this way, because that is old value. It doesn't work anymore. So what did I learn? What am I unlearning? And how am I going to relearn? But I don't want to relearn what I learned in the first place. This is the opening to that fifth world. It's verb-based. For using more verbs, and it's going to make more sense as this interview, as we go through time, that yes, indeed, earth is a verb, not a noun. And so we continue with that value of learning what community is. It's just not humans and our resourcing of earth and going to church together, going to demonstrations together, going to spiritual retreats together. That's not community. The value of earth is a community, acknowledging you, earth acknowledging your humanity rather than humanity defining what humanity is. So we're leaving out the biggest mystery that can solve our problems by accepting that the intuition of earth, the intuition can and make it living languages. Don't speak about survival. And I think communities who are away from living languages are attempting through survival language, an angry language of lacking. So they make up these psychologies to function. Just a short story. And a native leader that I know, I won't mention any names, tried to grow up in the Western society, coming from the society of Lakota. And excuse me, growing up in the Western society and having all kinds of problems, not knowing how to pay bills, money, mannerisms, everything dressing correctly, fitting a uniform. So he went back to the reservation and asked, I'm having all kinds of problems. So the medicine person said, well, you're here. You're not having any problems with us as Lakota, as who you are. But when you go into that world, you're having all kinds of problems. Why don't you go to them and one of their psychiatrists of how to function in that society? And then he did, and he was able to pay his bills and all that. But the bigger part of him was non-civilization community, was the community of earth. So he saw it and he healed from that. And yes, we as Native people can function in this society if we don't lose the value of being intuitive Indigenous peoples, the indigeneity in all of us. So it's more of a value of not knowing what you know, Thomas, or your information. I don't want to know that. I want to know what you're thinking now. Then we're in the present, because things are going to change. Earth is going to change us. We are not ever going to change Earth, though we'd like to think that. That means you're not here, understanding that the true change of being present with Earth. Yeah.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. And given our time, is there anything you want to leave us with? Any thoughts or any something to reflect on. I mean, you gave us so much to reflect on already. But if there's anything important to you that we didn't touch on that you would love to bring in, please.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to say one more thing about domination, because I think this is key, is that domination is the crux of anthropocentrism's self-importance. That domination deadens the feeling of life as intuitive and non-dogmatic. In domination's shadow, the self becomes isolated. Domination corrupts the rational mind and undercuts intuitive values, senses, and living in balance with Mother Earth. Domination, it's manipulative, measuring, weighing, possessing, objectifications, subjections, subjecting the world to false authority. And so we unknowingly fight against our own elemental consciousness, and we try to hammer consciousness into a rational box built on hierarchy, dogma, elitism, class, and race. It's a box of domination and anthropocentrism and all the other isms that confine us in that box. As you've heard, the people tried to think outside the box. There's many more people living outside that box that understand what's going on in the box. And the small example is our language in Lakota is so inclusive. There's room for everyone, including Earth. But we are confined to reservations. So to me, that's saying that English has not room for Indigenous thought and consciousness. And also, an elder, excuse me, didn't mean to sigh that much. An elder said that when you all came here to America, to the United States, before it was America, United States, you came here with your own religions. That's yours. That's your people's. We'll never touch that. That's who you are. You came here with your laws. Won't touch that. That's your way. We'll never touch. No one's going to take that from you. He also said this, but we didn't see one thing that you came here with, and that was land. We don't know how the land became yours, and you put those laws and religions on that land, and that's called domination. So free the earth. The concepts get in our way. And I think there's a lot more to be said, because this needs to be a longer conversation, not just from the head, but from who we are, as you know, Thomas, that we are truly coming from this place called a Chante. Chante is in connection with trees and earth and all that. And of course, the human being, the heart, we call it. So I think part of it is understanding the intelligences that no one speaks for is the stones and the wind and the plants and the fire and the water. We don't hear that enough. And so when we get that intimately in our language again, we won't have to use words like environment, because we sense it intuitively. We're living it. So I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to say, but it feels like something said, this is what you're supposed to say. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I feel deeply for, like, first of all, I think what you just said, it needs a longer conversation. Maybe we find other chances to have a longer conversation. I would love that, because I feel deeply with and for, like, when I feel the resonances of your words, it feels deeply connecting or relational or together in a space, and it resonates deeply in me, in and not only in me as Thomas, as a bigger me.
Mm.
And yeah, and it touches me also to feel the pain of domination, and I'm very sorry for that. That's what's happening, and I think if we work together and we have more of this deeper spaces, I think that hopefully is conducive to change, and we can be together in the exploration more. I would love that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
And Tiokasin, thank you for joining us. I think it's great. It's at least for I think a Western mind very reframing, and I think if it liberates a lot of space.
Yes. Yes. It's well spoken. I had a fellow teacher at university here talk about the first time she ever came to South Dakota because her country is rocks and hills. And she came and came in the night. She woke up in the morning and she was driving early in the morning, and then the sun came up and she could see for hundreds of miles, and it took her breath away. That thinking is expansive, not growth, but expansive. That's how much availability is to us, as you know. So yeah, I think an intuitive mind is missing because we've, as Einstein said, we've taken that rational mind and made it the sacred gift. Yeah. But thank you. It's an honor to be here. Um, I simplified the language so much because we need to live as relatives with Earth, like we are actually her children. We need to listen to Earth and not try to be her parent.
Yeah.
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 It's an honor to speak with you, and thank you for this time. I walk away deepened and enriched from this conversation. So thank you. And I'm sure everybody who's listening can take a lot away to contemplate and walk with. I think it's beautiful. Thank you.
There's so much here. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl. Stay connected and get updates about new episodes by visiting our website, pointofrelationpodcast.com, and by subscribing to the Thomas Hübl YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share about us with your community on social media. Thank you. We appreciate your support.